Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And as always, I have another wonderful guest with me today. He's just has a lot of inspirational stories and messages to share with us. His name is Clay Boatright. He is an inspirational storyteller, speaker, author, coach, and advocate for people with disabilities. His recently published book titled God's Plan, Our Circus, uses humor and faith to inspire people going through difficult life challenges, such as raising children with severe autism, long-term illness, or the premature death of a spouse. Clay firmly believes that life is too important to take seriously. Clay, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, when I saw your profile, especially when I saw the title of the book, it's like, I need to get this guy on the show because it really is a very compelling title.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. Yeah. When I came up with it, it was trying, how do we be succinct and just kind of prove the point right off the bat? You know, God has a plan for all of us, but the funniest thing is he doesn't ask for our opinion sometimes. And a phrase that a sentence I used in the book is, God is smarter than we are, and we need to get over it. And a lot of times our lives are basically responding to what he's charted out for us.
Yeah, he doesn't ask for our permission or our approval, does he?
No, he doesn't. Yeah, he gets to play that God card, really, really well. and I think our job is not to try and second guess him, but more respond. And the best way to respond is to kind of get the clues from him. What direction is he trying to take us, and then kind of go that way. And in the end, it tends to work out pretty well. He designed this planet well, and he's moved it along for a few gazillion years. So,
And if we don't go along with this plan, or if we try and fight it, because we know better, of course, we all think we do, life doesn't go so smoothly. So once we just kind of surrender to that power and say, okay, tell me what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Again, he has a grand plan for all of us. And it's really our job to kind of listen for it. And I mentioned, yes, he is smarter than we are. He is not our celestial bellhop. He doesn't work for us. He's not on our payroll. Something I figured out a long time ago is that you mentioned some of the unique challenges that we've been through. So my wife and I had 3 daughters. Our oldest is a traditional child. She's 26 and expecting my first grandchild in September.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then she has a 23-year-old identical twin sisters who both have really severe intellectual disabilities and autism. So that was kind of an interesting challenge, raising our family. And as soon as we got everybody out of the house, our oldest went off to college. Our twins, we had a wonderful group home set up for them. Yeah, Carol came down with, or was diagnosed with, ovarian cancer, and then passed away 18 months later. So that's kind of some unique circumstances. God had that in control the whole time. I didn't ask for any of them. Okay. But what I was able to do is, by looking at what was there to learn from those things and kind of follow that, that's where the uplifting joy came from. So I frame it up to people that I have been blessed with some very unique challenges. And sometimes people say, blessed with a challenge. I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? We think blessings are happy things and things that make us smile, beautiful home, beautiful family, nice vacations, things like that. Well, a lot of times a challenge, a blessing is anything that God's involved in. Okay. And so often he will let things play out, or he may cause something or let it play out that we don't like, because again, his plan is, he knows his plan. We don't. Right. So when he lets something play out, even if it's something that we don't like, it's still a blessing. The thing is, at the moment, we're like, God, why'd you do this to me? Why am I in this? Why have you abandoned me? Well, no, it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. He's actually with us and helping us mold us in certain ways. And it's not until after the fact you're able to realize that. So that's where the hope, and to me, that's the ultimate faith, is having faith that's going to come through. So anyway, I maintain that attitude, and that's kept me out of trouble.
Well, sometimes we can't see the blessings when we're in the thick of the muck or whatever it is that we're experiencing. But when you get to the other side, when you come through, it's like that. Wow, thank goodness that happened to me. I'm grateful. There's a song that the lyrics go something like, I'm grateful for the scars. And it's like, well, yeah, because if we didn't have those scars and those experiences, nobody gets through life without them.
No, absolutely. And I think when you hear people's stories and the challenges they've been or how they've come through those, what really molds us more than anything are the challenges. It's not the good, happy stuff. I mean, those are nice, certainly, but what helps us grow and helps us learn, become better people, if you will, are the challenges that we endure. So I through networking, I personally hate that word, but anyway, you hear people network, and you'll see presentations that are given about people who come out and talk about their success. Okay, well, that's fine. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. I'm usually asleep within 5 minutes. What I'm much more interested in, I mean, I'm happy for them. Yay, yay, you know, good for you.
Right.
What I want to hear about are the challenges, the times that they were at the bottom and they were convinced that their family was crumbling or they were going out of business or whatever. I want to hear that part and how they got through that. To me, that's where the learning comes from. It's not the happy stuff. It's the challenge that you transfer into something more positive.
I love that you use that word. It's one of my favorite words, the learning. That's where the learning comes from, because we're always learning as long as we keep an open mind. And I think challenges and obstacles are actually opportunities to learn and to grow.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I look at my own history, my life would have been incredibly boring without my challenges. I mean, I just wrote a book about them. I mean, trust me, the book about the happy stuff would be incredibly boring. Yeah, it would be not that. But the book about the challenges, which in fact are the happy stuff, it is where the inspiration comes from. That's where I think the story is.
So let's go back talking about the blessings, because it just my brain just went to your twins and being blessed with your twins, because during that time that you were dealing with, this challenge, it created incredible opportunities for you. You actually said in your profile that you had 2 full-time jobs, one to, pay the bills, and the other one to help be an advocate for people with disabilities.
Sure. No, and I am an anomaly in some different ways. So compared to most men, I almost never talk about my work, to the point that some people think I'm in the mafia. I'm not I'm not nearly that interesting, not nearly that exciting.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you. Right. Just let the FBI know that it's all good. So early on, I realized that my main job was the care of my family. And this was before the twins were even born. So it's my relationship with God and my relationship with my family is where my identity comes from. It's not come from where I pay my bills, which is how I viewed the paying job. And the story around the twins and how they impacted me in a huge way was, the first several years. First, they were not diagnosed prenatally. Okay, so we didn't know that they had their disabilities until the 24-month well baby visit, when we're at the pediatrician, and Carol, my late wife, is holding one twin, I'm holding the other, and we go through the developmental milestone checklist. Can say X number of words, can crawl, can do all these different things. We got to the bottom of the list for the child we were holding and looked at each other and realized neither one of us had checked anything off the list.
Oh,
so that was like, something's up. Eventually go to Easter Seals, find out their diagnosis of what's now called intellectual disabilities, and autism was added to it. So then the circus is off and running there. And it was pretty crazy. They even now they're 23, they cannot speak. They need assistance with all activities of daily living. That's a technical phrase in the industry. So they need help with everything bathroom related, getting dressed, undressed, and so on. But anyway, when they were younger, it was tough. And I called my family the Boatright Circus because it was pretty nutty. And one night, they were 4 years old, so it was 2004. It was a Friday night, and they were not doing well. The twins were having meltdowns, crying for reasons we didn't understand. Blair was upset because of the situation. Carol, I was married. She and I were married for 30 years. I saw the woman cry 4 times. Okay, she was not a crier. Yeah, she would rip your lungs out through your throat, but she was not a crier. But she was very mad and upset. So, I did what any good father, leader, husband would do. I went to bed, and I'm like, I cannot fix this. Everyone will be here in the morning. So I went to bed, and I'm laying in bed, and to be honest with you, I'm mad at God. I really am. And but God can handle it. He can handle us being mad at him. But I'm laying in bed and I'm saying a prayer. And I said, God, why did you do this to Paige and Mia? Their severe disability. Why did you do that to Paige and Mia? And to be blunt, why'd you do it to me? This is not what I signed up for. Okay. So that was the question that was on my mind as I fell asleep, was why did you do this? So I don't usually go to bed mad, but when I do, it's like the emotions marinate overnight, and I'll wake up the next morning almost madder than I was the night before. Well, that Saturday morning, I woke up and it was totally different. I was excited. It was like waking up on a mountaintop on a bright spring day. I had fresh air in my lungs. I was ready to take on the world. I was excited. I was pumped. And the very first words that entered my mind were to help people like Paige and Mia, which I immediately interpreted as helping people with severe disabilities like they had. Okay. As sure as you and I are on this podcast right now, there is zero doubt in my mind. I fell asleep asking God a question, and he sent the Holy Spirit and answered it. Because there's no way, given the chaos of my life, focus on work and all that, there's no way I would have cooked that up on my own. So 2 great things happened at that moment. Number 1, it happened. Number 2, I had the wherewithal to realize it. So I thought, all right, what do I do? What do I do? So I did what millions of people do every day when they have questions. I Googled it. So I went to the computer, typed 4 words into the computer. This was the vernacular at the time. So we now call their condition intellectual disabilities. At the time, the official diagnosis was mental retardation. So I typed mental retardation, Dallas help, 4 words, enter. Up came an organization I had never heard of before called the Arc of Dallas. Reached out to they looked at the website. Hey, looks like a group that helps people with disabilities. Come to find out, the ARC system in the United States is the oldest series of nonprofits helping people with intellectual disabilities. Reached out to their board, reached out to them on Monday, was invited to meet them. I joined the board a week later. I became their board president about 2 years after that. I got involved in the state organization a few years after that. Along the way, I'm meeting families, I'm learning issues, I'm learning the challenges, I'm learning what services out there. I get into the state level, I'm meeting legislators, I'm going down to Austin. I live in Texas, I go down to Austin. I'm testifying before legislative committees, talking to politicians, talking to Health and Human Services administrators. I'm getting to know them, they're getting to know me. At one point, a few years after that, the President of the United States, President Obama, appointed me to a presidential advisory committee.
Wow.
So I got really well connected, and along the way, I'm meeting people and I'm hearing their stories. And as I'm learning the system, I'm able to say, well, here's some ideas. You know, I'm presenting them options that they did not have before, as well as trying to influence the overall support system. So I feel uniquely blessed in that from that Friday night, you know, I asked God a question. You know, with the selfish side is within 9 years of that, I'm on a presidential advisory committee in Washington. I wouldn't have imagined that. But even more importantly, much more important, I was able to fulfill the direction. He said that Paige and Mia have their disabilities in order for for us, our family, to help people with disabilities like they have. And I feel blessed that I've been able to do that over time.
Okay. So I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because, you know, of course, you did this, you know, with the intention of helping people with disabilities, probably never anticipating that you would end up actually, you know, being appointed by President Obama for the advisory board or committee or whatever it was. What was that like, being tapped for a position like that? And did you take a moment to say, oh, is that what you were trying to tell me? You know, I mean, what was going through your mind?
Well, you know, that I was not anticipating that at all. And I share the specifics in the book where I had the opportunity to meet some people in the administration. And one day I'm at my office, the paying job office, and my cell phone rings. And it's a lawyer from the White House. So I answer my phone and he introduces himself and says, hi, my name is Jones, and I'm a lawyer for the White House. And my first thought was, oh, crap, what did I do? You know,
right.
So somehow I'm in trouble. Yeah, that permanent record from elementary school is about to come back and bite me. I knew it would. So anyway, he mentioned that my name had been submitted to this committee. You know, it's the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities. And I had never heard of it, but he asked if I'd be interested in serving. And I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure no's not the right answer. You know, but thanks for asking. So I'm like, yeah, sure. And long story short, went through the vetting process. So here, a little committee in Washington, they've got thousands of committees, right? A little committee in Washington, the vetting process was like nothing that I had ever seen.
I could imagine.
It's not just background checks. It's a level of intimacy into your family finances that your CPA has never gotten. I mean, it was deep. Because they're wanting to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. That's the biggest thing. But anyway, so it was served on it for 2 years, and I kind of, how to put this, I look at things a little differently than the average person on the street. So if everybody is going to the left, I'm the one to say, hey, what's on the right? You know, that type of thing. And so a lot of discussions like that, but it was a fun experience.
So I just have to ask, okay, so there you were sitting in your office, you get that call from the White House attorney, and after you hung up, did you casually walk out of your office and say to your coworkers, oh, that was the White House on the phone and I was invited to join a committee? And what did you do? Did you call your wife and say, you're never going to believe this? What did you do?
Well, yeah, that was the conversation I had when we got home. Actually, the first one that you described, I could not do because they were very specific not to tell anybody. So they don't want anyone to know who is being considered. It had to be completely top secret until final decisions were made, because they're going through and doing all the background checks and everything. So they don't want anybody knowing anything until they've decided who they want to put on the committee. So actually, it was the opposite. I couldn't tell anybody.
Wow. Could you tell Carol?
Yeah, I could tell Carol. But it wasn't until the press release from the White House came out about it that I then turned around and forwarded it to the CEO of the company I worked for, who was about 4 levels above me. And I said, hi, Greg, just wanted to give you a heads up. This has come out because it said my name and it said the company I worked for. And I just want to let you know. And I had no idea what his response was going to be. And let me put it this way, his political leanings are not exactly the same as President Obama's political leanings. So I'm like, heads up. And he replied, he was very, very complimentary to the chairman and CEO, and say, Clay, that's delighted, and they're lucky to have you, that type of thing, which was very nice.
Well, if you're not looking at it from a political lens, if you're just looking at it from, the good that you can do being on that committee, I mean, that kind of neutralizes
absolutely. That's how I looked at it, is that it's an opportunity to serve. And in those environments, the politics really are not relevant. It's more the ability to contribute in some way.
Oh my gosh, that's just awesome. Wow. Okay. So take us then a little bit further down the road as you're going through life. And now that, your girls are getting to the point where you are going to be empty nesters.
Sure. So we had some interesting challenges along the way, many with Paige and Mia. We also had some with our oldest daughter, the traditional developing daughter, but nothing bad. I mean, just, the joys of raising kids, right? So Blair, our oldest, went off to college, and when Paige and Mia, I guess they were about 16, and even though we had help at home, it was tough. It was really intense. And through a variety of services, we were able to be on a program called HCS here in Texas, which does enable you to get group home services. And we got to a point that it was getting pretty strenuous. We really couldn't handle it on our own, even with the help. So I started reaching out to people I knew. Now, keeping in mind, through the years in the Dallas area, when it came to the disability community, I knew everybody, and everybody knew me. Okay. So I thought, well, I'll reach out to folks that I've known all these years and put something together. Funny how it didn't quite work out that way. I remember a little bunny trail here. A friend of mine told me a long time ago when he got laid off from his job. He said, when you get laid off and you reach out to everybody you've known who you knew would be able to help you, he said, the people that you've always thought you could count on won't do crap. He said, it's going to be the people who you've never met, who just come out of the woodwork, who will give you your next job opportunity. I kind of went through some of that, and I got a lot of pushback from, well, because of Paige and Mia's level of disability, it's so severe, they didn't fit the model for the various providers who I knew. And I don't fault them. I get it. They have a business that they're trying to run, and they have to structure it a certain way. And the sad thing is our support system doesn't really allow for consideration for people who are on the extreme, like the twins. Well, I eventually got connected with a provider I'd never heard of before, but who was willing to take a chance, and it worked out great. So we were able to get them set up in a group home. It was about 2 months before their 17th birthday. And it was very close to our house, so we could see them quite often. This was what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So I see them every Sunday, if not more often. Yesterday, I went with Paige, one of my twins, to a doctor's appointment. So yeah, I'm still very, very much engaged. But we got the twin set up finally. Blair, our oldest, she's out of the house. Carol goes back to work for the first time in 20 years. You know, she had been a stay-at-home mom the entire time. She had worked some part-time jobs, retail, but now is going back to full-time career. And then 6 months after she started her full-time career again, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Wow.
Had a surgery, thought they got it all. They didn't. Went through 18 months of chemo and then eventually passed away. And it was a bit of that was disappointing. Obviously, it was some unique challenges. Probably a very understatement. That was disappointing. Yeah, that's the understatement of the morning. But here's where kind of the next phase comes in, and this is another example of challenges that we didn't ask for that really turned out well. So she passed away on February 11th, 2020. February 11th, 2020. So interestingly enough, she never heard the word COVID. Okay, because she passed right before COVID really took off.
Yeah, I was wondering about that when I saw the date that she died in 2020, and I thought, oh my gosh, if you guys were all going through this, in the midst of COVID, that would have made a horrible situation so much worse.
Oh yes, and COVID would have driven Carol crazy. She she would have well, she would have been like, the world has lost its mind in terms of the way it had handled it. But
Carol and I are soul sisters then.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But she passed away February 11th, and Blair came back home for her mother's services, and 3 days later it's Valentine's Day. And Blair asked if she could go out for Valentine's Day with her boyfriend, now her husband. I said, sure, go ahead. So left me by myself. And here it is, Valentine's Day, 3 days after Carol passing away. I go to a grocery store across the street from our house or get something to eat, and I'm all sad and depressed. Here it is. My only friend, certainly my best friend, arguably my only friend, died 3 days ago. I'm all by myself. My kids are all out of the house. This would have been our 33rd Valentine's Day. So woe is me. Life sucks. God, why? We had the challenges with the twins. Carol had Hodgkin's disease, which is a form of lymph node cancer, early in our marriage. So it's just been an ongoing series of challenges. Woe is me. Life sucks. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm walking through the store, feeling woe is me, all depressed. When I get to aisle 9, hair care aisle. Don't know if hair care is relevant, but that's where it happened. The hair care aisle of Tom Thumb grocery store. And in an instant, blink of an eye, everything changed. I suddenly found myself smiling. I was uplifted. That fresh air that I described earlier from you came in, and I was ready to take on the world. And instantly, I knew what had happened. In that blink of an eye, God revealed 2 things to me with absolute clarity. And again, it had to be God because there's no way I would have cooked it up on my own. But he revealed 2 things with clarity. Number 1 was, Carol's doing great. She's doing a lot better than the rest of us. She was a Christian, and she then was experiencing what all Christians aspire for. That's to be with God for eternity. So the way I've looked at it is God released me from having to mourn Carol, because you don't mourn somebody who's doing better than you are. Okay. Did I miss her? Of course I did. It's a different kettle of fish though, but she was doing great. So number 1, Carol's doing great. Number 2 had to do with me. So I was 55 years old at the time. I'm 58 now, but I was 55 at the time. I had been married for 30 years. Okay, 55. So God willing, and I use those words literally, I may still have another 30 ahead of me. Okay? So I'm only halfway done. All right. For the first time in my adult life, I had virtually no obligations and responsibilities. I was barely responsible for myself. My kids were out of the house. got independent of me, got the situation set up for Paige and Mia's care with state services and so on, taking care of them. Blair has her education and is doing great. Carol is now with God. So I'm not responsible for anything anymore. So when I looked at that, and again, this is, I feel kind of God leading me this path, was I can literally do whatever I want. How often does that happen?
Was that liberating or terrifying?
Oh, it was liberating. It was like having a ton of bricks lifted off my shoulder. That for the first time in my life, I could literally do whatever I want. The $1 million question is, what does God want me to do with that opportunity? And as I realized that, it hit me, okay, Clay, compared to when I walked in the store 3 minutes, 5 minutes earlier, what exactly do I have to be sad about? Lonely? Yeah, okay, you can get over that. A few months later, I discovered something called dating apps. That's a great way to fix loneliness. Oh yeah. We'll talk about that in a second. But
yeah, I'm dying to hear that.
Yeah. So there's the loneliness thing, which was a real deal. But from a future standpoint, what's the saying, the song, "My future's so bright, I got to wear shades." There's no reason why it shouldn't be. So that's where the excitement came from. And that's where, I eventually wrote the book and have tried to convey a lot of what I've discussed here, the positivity that we find in our challenges, or that come out of our challenges. If we can find those, then that can help you get through anything. The book is a humor and faith-based tale, leveraging off my experiences to hopefully inspire people going through unique challenges. The topics are heavy. I talk about raising children with disabilities, wife going through chemo, passing away. So it's heavy topics. There's a lot of humor, but the comic relief is the final chapter, which is the joys of dating in your mid-50s.
Oh, geez. Okay. Wait a minute. That almost sounds like an oxymoron.
Well, it again, it's all in how you look at it. So and to the point, in that chapter, I talk about a conversation I had with a woman who wanted to hear my story, so I shared it. And then when I was done, she said, "Well, Clay, we all have experiences and challenges, baggage and drama." And I thought about that, and I paused, and I said, yes and no. We all have experiences and challenges. That's absolute truth. But baggage and drama are optional. It's all in how you choose to look at it. And happiness is a choice. So the happiness is a choice, I realized, was an underpinning of the whole book, and really an underpinning of all the experiences that I had. The things that have happened were part of God's plan. He didn't check with me, and I didn't ask for them. So I couldn't control that, could not control that. The only thing I could control was how I responded to them. And I chose to respond to them by persevering through them, identifying what was the best path among different options to proceed forward, and then choose the happiness angle as opposed to the woe is me angle. But
I'm curious, have you always had an irrepressible sense of humor and a level of optimism in your life?
I think so. The optimism, the sense of humor is, I can be a little quirky, so I look at things from an alternative view. Again, if everyone's going one direction, I'm like, hey, what's over there? What's the other direction? And things that maybe will depress people or get them sad, I try to look at what's the positive takeaway from there. I don't know. Are you familiar with the love languages, the 5 love languages?
I'm familiar with it. I never did read the book.
So it's actually, I bought into it. There's some legitimacy there. And even though I don't necessarily need it in return, what I discovered is I'm really good at giving words of affirmation, which is kind of building people up and helping them see the positive opportunities from their various situations. But no, when I started dating a few months after Carol passed, again, I had the grocery store revelation, realized that God's presented opportunities for me. Didn't know what those were, but I was pretty sure that God didn't want me to do them by myself, right? Not to mention, eating dinner alone was painful. This is funny. I had been married for 30 years and had traveled for work and so on. And I had eaten lunch at work by myself a million times. I had traveled and eaten dinner by myself hundreds of times. In 30 years of being married, I could not think of one time where I had eaten dinner alone in my own house.
Wow.
It never happened because either Carol was there or the children were there or whatnot. And I didn't like it. I just really didn't care for it. And so a few months later, I sold our house, moved to an entertainment district here in the Plano, Texas area called Legacy West. And I started getting on dating apps, started
Okay,
meeting
I just
people.
want to interrupt you for a minute. What is an
Sure.
entertainment?
Entertainment district?
Yes.
So I guess that could sound kind of bad, couldn't it?
Well, yeah.
No,
I mean, my mind was going really in some crazy directions here.
No, not near as salacious as you may have been. It's an area, a very upscale area called Legacy West. So there's a lot of there's a Gucci store, a Tiffany store. When I was real young, I always thought it'd be cool to live in Manhattan, to kind of have that urban experience. Life took me a different direction. So here I was, I could do whatever I want. So in this area, it's a several block area where you've got a lot of upscale shopping, upscale restaurants, and there's also an apartment complex. So I rented an apartment right above some fountains that have music. So for 2 years, I had my own Bellagio show going on outside my apartment. I'd sit on my balcony, and I've got hundreds of people walking up and down enjoying the thing, and here I am watching the light show from the fountain. So that's what it was.
Okay.
So anyway, started getting on dating apps. Now, this is important. Carol and I met when I was 21 and she was 20. And almost from the very beginning, we were glued at the hip. Okay. And I didn't really date much in high school. This is kind of funny. I stayed at home through high school, undergrad, and grad school. And I graduated high school year early, undergrad year early, grad school year early. So I had my grad degree when I was 21. So I just stayed home through all that. The same week I moved out of my parents' house is when I had my first date with the woman who I'd be married to for 30 years. So I went from one domineering woman to another domineering woman in the course of 4 days. So Carol and I met, glued at the hips, got married 3 years later, have a life. So now here I am, 55 years old, starting to date with the dating acumen of a 17-year-old. I had no clue what I was doing, as well demonstrated. And it was funny. My oldest daughter, Blair, had gotten married, and she and I are very close. I'm close with all my children, but she and I would have daddy-daughter dates, once every week, 2 weeks, and we would have conversations. And if you looked at the script of our conversations, it would be hard to tell who's the parent and who's the child, because here she is married and living in the house and doing all that stuff. And here I am going out with a different woman every night, just to have somebody to eat dinner with. Okay. And she's giving me advice of, Dad, don't do that. Don't say that, because I've got the dating experience of a 17-year-old in a 55-year-old body. And anyway, so it was a fascinating experience. Then you throw in the whole dating app environment that we didn't have in 1986 and take it from there.
So first of all, I'm going to apologize. Somebody must be crawling around my yard because the dogs are barking. Can you hear that?
I cannot hear that at all.
Okay, well then let's keep on going. I just made that story up. But yeah, that's so you were actually asking dating advice from your daughter.
Absolutely.
I could not imagine anything more awkward. I'm talking from the daughter's standpoint.
Well, I get that. And Blair and I have always had because of the craziness of our family, we've had a uniquely good relationship. In fact, and I say this humbly, and I think she would be comfortable with me saying this, over the years, a lot of her girlfriends, who she's very close to, would say that they kind of envied the relationship that she and I had, because they didn't have those kind of relationships with her dad. Yes, we probably have conversations that you don't normally see between father and daughter. But at the end of the day, I am her father. She is my daughter. I mean, there are certain things that you don't talk about, obviously. She did make a point of telling me something once. She said, Daddy, you know how there are some things about my relationship with Trevor, that's her husband, even when they were married, or before they got married. She said, there's some things about my relationship with Trevor that you don't really want to know about. And I said, yeah. She said, yeah, it's the same way, same thing. I went, got it. I'm on top of it.
That is so funny. Okay, so you're 55, you're on these dating apps. Would you say it's going well, or it's a train wreck? or somewhere in the middle?
People have a love-hate relationship with dating apps. Now, keeping in mind, this was at the height of the pandemic. So again, God's sense of humor. God's sense of humor is he gives me the opportunity to date people right when he shuts the planet down.
Mm-hmm.
So you add that factor in there. I really view them as just a mechanism for meeting people. So I was never the kind of person who, and even still am not, who can walk into a restaurant or a bar and go up to the bar and see a pretty lady and strike up a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I am a fish out of water in that. I would literally trip on the floor before I got to the bar. I'd be so scared to death.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually work pretty well. I've met a lot of people. I put in the book that I dated a lot, and I mean a lot. I went out I ate out every night, and I rarely dined alone. So do the math.
Yeah.
And then I put my
but this was during the pandemic.
Yes. So there were, again, in Texas, our rules were a little bit more lax in other places.
Right. Okay.
So at first it was more like meeting and eating out or something, or outside the restaurant, but I was still meeting quite a bit. And then as soon as the restrictions got lifted, of course it takes off. But I say my credit card statement looked like I was taking every unattached woman in North Texas out for a nice meal. And at the time I told myself, I'm looking for the next partner, right? Which was true. In hindsight, it was also to fill the loneliness void.
Of course.
Because as I described, I hadn't eaten dinner alone in my own house, ever. So a lot of it was that as well. I met a lot of fascinating people. I refer to it as the world's most fascinating sociology experiment, where you just hear stories. I knew my experience, but I'd hear other people's stories that I'm like, wow, you got me beat. I mean, there's some significant challenges. I would also hear stories of people who said, oh, life, my marriage was so rough, and they give me some examples. And I'd feel bad for them, but when they were done, I'm like, okay, that's what I call last Thursday. I mean, it's like really, how do you get out of bed in the morning? I would never say that, of course, but you kind of see that. One of the things that amazed me, again, I had no reason to have a line of sight into the dating environment of the 21st century, was the stories I heard about my fellow brethren, my fellow men, letting the species down through poor behavior. And we don't need to get into specifics. We can if you choose to, but I would hear stories about what guys texting unsolicited photographs. I will leave it at that.
Oh, gross.
And that, so we will go into detail, but I'm sitting there going, I'm thinking from a guy standpoint, I'm thinking, when you're thinking through this, where does that suddenly seem like a good idea?
Yeah.
And so I would hear all these stories. I heard one a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, all right, that's now the kookiest. But when I started to realize, well, when I first started dating, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of men out there, right? And I'm a marketing guy, marketing research guy by background. So differentiation, when you've got a brand, the whole point of a brand is how do you differentiate this brand from that brand? So play Boatright brand. How do I differentiate that? Put a lot of mind time into it. Well, I eventually realized one of the easiest ways to differentiate myself was don't be a jerk.
I can't believe you said that, because that was the words in my head was don't be a jerk. Yeah.
And it's surprisingly easy. And it's amazing to me the number of guys who haven't quite figured that out. But hey, what's the old say? You do you, I'll do me. You whatever you want to give a shot. But anyway, so it's been a fascinating experience.
That's crazy, because I recently interviewed a woman who started dating in her 50s. Her husband passed away. They had been together for years and years and years. It was her one and only, true love. And so she was talking about the dating apps and dating in her mid-50s, and talking about what did she say? The decline of the, men or something like that. It was really, really funny. So to hear it from a man's standpoint of, dating, and a woman's standpoint is really, really fascinating for me.
Yeah. Chivalry is apparently taking a backseat in a lot of things. Now,
Yeah.
I will also say there are a fair number of women out there who their fathers are probably not particularly proud of them. I remember talking about the picture thing,
Yes.
and I referenced this in the book that I received a photograph that was texted to me, and in the book I describe it as she obviously never got the lesson that I told Blair, my oldest daughter, when she was 15, and that is, at no time should your naked body and a working camera be in the same room at the same time. That always ends poorly. That always ends poorly. But anyway.
Yeah. What's really funny, because an old friend of mine from growing up, he was actually my first boyfriend before I moved to Denver, and he's one of the main reasons why I moved to Denver. But anyhow, nice guy. But his wife had passed away when she was 54 from breast cancer. So he was dating again. So our paths kind of crossed again. And, so we were just talking as friends, and he would tell me some of his stories about dating. And he says, it's just a nightmare out there. And, of course, doing the online, the apps and everything like that. So some of the behavior of the women that he was going out with, he says, I just give up. I'm just not going to do it anymore. And I says, well, why don't you just go to your church group or something like that? And he says, well, the pool is small.
The pool is small, and because I thought the same thing. So even before I got on dating apps, I thought, well, hey, church is a great place to go. And I had been a deacon at a church here in Plano, which has 40,000 members. It's a big church, and I knew it well. I wasn't a member at the time, but I knew the church. So I over the course of 2 weekends, so between Saturday night and Sunday mornings, I went to 7 adult Bible fellowships for my age group, 50 plus. Went to 7 of them, of course. All very nice people, so not a commentary there. But my goodness, the crowd, they were half dead. They just didn't know it yet. I mean, the energy level was it was exasperating. Now I was the youngest. Most of them were older, so that's the thing. But I'm like, okay, that may not be the vehicle to me.
Yeah.
And I talked to a pastor friend of mine, and he said, well, maybe you should like go into some of the younger groups, like the 40-year-olds, because I have a more younger, youthful enthusiasm and so on. So I'm like, okay. So I text or sent an email to the director at the church who's over the 40-year-old groups and introduced myself, told him my story, and said, hey, I was wondering if there may be a Bible fellowship or church group that you could recommend for me in your age group. And he emailed me back and was very polite and Clay, I'm sorry to hear about your wife, and so on and so forth. Then he said, I'm not sure our classes would be right for you. Okay. So I'm fully expecting him to say, oh, absolutely. Here, right. Not what I got. I don't think our classes would be right for you. And he said, however, our church has a wonderful grief recovery class that you should consider. Okay. I know his intention is good, so I don't challenge the intention. As a side note, raising our children, Carol and I had the opportunity to go to a variety of support care, just conversations, support groups. We went once and walked out wanting to shoot ourselves. It was physically painful. I don't do well sitting in groups of people who just want to sit around and complain about their lives. So, but anyway, so he recommended the grief recovery class, and I thought about that, and I said, okay, I need to respond. So I replied, and I said, David, I think was his name. I said, David, thank you so much for responding, and I appreciate your condolences, and I appreciate the suggestion, but you and I obviously haven't met. I'm the end objective of the grief recovery class, and I know that sounds arrogant, but I wanted to try and convey that assumption may not apply to everybody. You mentioned a moment ago you have some friends who had lost their spouses. Here's one thing I learned meeting people and meeting widows who had lost their husbands. The losing a spouse suddenly, like in a car accident or from COVID. I've met a lot of women who lost their husbands due to COVID.
Wow.
So losing a spouse suddenly versus losing one after an extended illness like I did are so different, they cannot be compared. They are totally different experiences. In one, the first, you're dealing with a shock. You weren't planning on it. It's unexpected. I mean, it is a true shock to the system. In my situation, yes, the care period was very extended, but I always knew that there was a chance she could pass. And then in January of the year she died, that's when they told us there was nothing else they could do. So I had a full month to say goodbye, to get the affairs in order. We sat at the dining room table and had the proverbial "get your affairs in order" conversation. And that's where Carol, because Carol always paid the bills. I earned the money, she paid the bills. So that's where she taught me. This is just 3 years ago. She taught me, okay, we don't write checks anymore. We pay all the bills through our cell phone. And I'm like, really? So wait, I didn't know that. So we don't write checks anymore? She said, no. I said, when did that start? She said 5 years ago. I went, oh, okay. So she was teaching me the basics of how to care for myself. But no, on the losing a spouse suddenly versus after extended illness is they're so very, very different. And recognizing that is important. What I've noticed is people who lose their spouse after an extended illness generally are ready to get back and meet others more quickly than say those who lose them suddenly. And you can kind of figure out why. And a lot of it is also the care, the time that's spent caring, that can be exasperating. And of course you miss your spouse who's passed, but you're just in a better position to move forward more quickly. I also discovered that losing a spouse when there's no one else in the house, like in my situation, everybody's gone, versus losing one when there's still, say, a child living there or other people. It's just different. Again, a child is not the same as a spouse, obviously, but it does create a different tone.
Well, and everybody experiences grief and loss differently.
Absolutely. I went on one of the first dates I went on was a woman who told me she had originally been reluctant to go out with me because I was a widower, and she had dated a widower a couple years earlier, and his wife had been gone like 2 years, and he still had all her clothes in the closet and her bathrobe hanging on the back of the bathroom door. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's a little odd. And I told her, I said, exactly what you just said. Everyone has a right to grieve however they choose. So I won't challenge that. But I thought that was a little unusual. And I said, if it makes you feel any better, I had all of Carol's clothes out of my house a week after she died. Because my view of it was there was no way I could move forward with Clay 2.0. That was the outcome of the grocery store revelation was I launched Clay 2.0. Nothing wrong with the 1.0 version, but 2.0 is going to be different. There was no way I could seize that if I saw my wife's clothes hanging in the closet every morning when I got out of the shower.
Well, after my mother passed away, my dad had us getting rid of everything the next day.
Yeah.
All her clothes and everything. But I'm not even sure why, because he was dying at the same time. And he passed away 19 days after she did.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. That's interesting.
It was a crazy time. It was just a crazy time. They both died of the same thing. They both had leukemia.
Really interesting. So, did your father know he was terminal?
Oh yeah, it was pretty obvious, and he knew.
Oh,
he
really?
knew.
Okay.
And he knew it would be, relatively soon. It was imminent. Basically, he should have died the day after we buried her. I mean, I stayed with him back in, the house we grew up in. I took care of my mother in hospice at home. And then, because I've got the medical background and the skills, and plus the way I know how to deal with it since I've been in the medical field for over 40 years. And then, of course, after she passed, then I stayed with him, and I knew it was going to be really quick. And then he sent me home. He says, go back to Denver. And I says, no, I'm just going to stay here, a little while longer. It was right before Thanksgiving. And finally he says, no, you need to go home. And I knew I'd be back a few days later, which I was. But at least they were together.
That's what I was thinking. I'm sure that was certainly hard on you and on your family. But if you look at it from your parents' standpoint, and I've heard that so often of a spouse dying, particularly older, and then the other spouse, the surviving spouse, passes soon thereafter. Maybe like literally of a broken heart, maybe accelerates the situation. It sounds like your parents were their condition.
They were in stage.
It was inevitable that they were going to pass. But there's a blessing in that, in a way. And
there really is. Like I said, he should have died, the day after. But it's really interesting because, as a child viewing your parents, even as an adult child, I was witness to some very, very private moments between the two of them because I was always there, at the bedside taking care of her and, sleeping on the couch next to her. And I would witness these moments between them. And I've never shared any of those stories with my sisters or anybody else because it was like they were private moments. They were just for me to witness. And all I could think of was, wow, I never knew they really liked each other that much. Right?
So how long have they been married?
Oh, my goodness. They had been married. I guess they were getting close to 60 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 60 years.
So they were in their 80s, I assume.
Yeah, my mom was 80 when she died, and my father was just a few months shy of his 84th birthday.
Yeah.
So.
Now that's a great testimony there that you were able to see that love that they had. And we all get it. After been married for a while, you kind of get in the habit, and you may not necessarily show up, but then in that kind of fragile moment, slightly different variation. When Carol passed, it was the Monday night. She had come out of, so this is Monday, February 10th. That evening, I was watching TV in the living room, and she walked out of the bedroom. She hadn't been out of the bedroom in 3 weeks. Okay, but she walks out and sits on the couch. She was 54 and looked like she was 95 years old. Just the skin, her skin was drying up, and her hair was like bright, like Einstein gray. And frizzy. So she sits on the couch. I said, do you need something? Are you hungry? I ran to the fridge and I got some Jello because she really couldn't eat that much. So gave her some Jello, and I was holding, kind of had my arm around her and told her, I loved her, and she kind of murmured it back. She really couldn't talk that much, and at that moment, it was the strangest feeling came over me. So if you looked at it, it'd be kind of sad looking, but at that moment, it was like a strange sensation of love, but almost to the 10th power. I mean, it was like I had never experienced it before, and I recognized it as something that was unique. And my feeling was, I am exactly where I need to be right now. And there was a satisfaction, there was a comfort, there was a communal experience between Carol and me. And then after a few minutes, we went to bed. It was 10 o'clock at night. And when I look back now, and then Carol passed away that morning, and I won't walk you through all the specifics of that, but the short version is I actually was holding her head in my hands when she passed away. And the nice thing was it was in the darkness of our bedroom, nobody else in the house. There were no wires, tubes, or beeping machines involved. So it was a very special moment for me when she passed. But when I look back at that night before, sitting on the couch, and what that sensation was, I don't know this, but I suspect it. In hindsight, it was like the Holy Spirit kind of putting his arms around us because of that unique sensation. The Holy Spirit and God knew what was going to happen 4 hours later. She passed away 4 hours later. Okay. Wow. I did not know that at the time. But in hindsight, kind of looking back at that, you talk about age. So again, I look at things a little differently. Something I've told my oldest daughter, drives her crazy, but I stick by it.
That's your job as a father, to drive her crazy.
Exactly. I do it really well. That's why I got on Facebook.
Congratulations.
I got on Facebook to spread the gospel and help families with disabilities and embarrass my oldest daughter. So, if I can do all three in the same post, that's a trifecta. So but I've told her, you look at planning, like estate planning and so on. And I've said, I've got 75. That's my target age. Like 75, I can check out. I'm good. Oh, Dad, no, you need to live longer than that. I went, no. First, my
75 doesn't seem so old.
Well, yeah, the closer you get to it, right?
Right. My husband's 72. He'll be 73 in September. So I want a little bit more than that.
Well, your husband's going to live to 95. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So,
I'm not sure if okay, well, we'll have to think about that.
yeah, right. Exactly. But I think about what's a good age to go join God. And I think about it. So my dad died at 72 and my mother died like at 77, 78. So you split the difference, you're at 75. And I believe genetics drives 90% of the train on a lot of this
Absolutely.
stuff. So assuming you don't have some external factor. But so we'll figure 75. And then what I explained to her was 75's not a bad age to die, because after 75, things just start falling off of you. You know, I mean, just things don't work right. And, you know, you can take great care of yourself, but just you find yourself going to the doctor a lot and just things start getting weird. At 75, her children will be old enough to remember me. So I will have engaged with them. They'll be old enough to remember me. There's also, and again, every family is different, but based on what I've seen, you get to that certain point, and I want to pass away when everyone's going, oh man, God, he was so I so miss him, as opposed to 2 years later where they're saying, well, I'm kind of glad he's gone, you know, and because there's that point, right? And particularly folks who are in the sandwich generation, and that sandwich generation, it happens to each generation where you're taking care of your own kids and you're taking care of your parents. And yeah, I never want to be a burden. And I've seen someone die literally right in front of me. And after a rough illness. There are worse things. There really are. So that's my morbid I'm gonna die at 75 story.
Oh, well, okay, good to know.
There you go.
But I do want to say, just at that moment when someone does pass away, there is something incredibly peaceful and beautiful about it.
It really is.
I have watched so many people die in the course of my lifetime, because my first career, I was a respiratory therapist. So, you know, I was on the front line in the emergency room, the intensive care, you know, I saw it all in all ages. And there was definitely a certain amount of peace. It really made me start looking at death in a different way.
No, I get it. And yeah, there's a peace, and you realize that it's not as frightening. And I think particularly for a Christian, that in the book, the way I phrase it is, at the moment Carol passed, I phrase it as at that moment, Jesus took my wife of 30 years and brought her from my side to his side. Okay, because I didn't want to use the word died, because there's the finality associated with that. Passing away, again, has I wanted to phrase it as, it was a transition. That's really what it truly is. It's not a termination. It's not an ending. It's a transition. And that's a good transition.
Okay, so now let's go back to, you are a coach. Do you work with people one-on-one? Are you, I'm not going to call you this. I'm not even going to say it. Well, I probably will. You're not a grief coach. I know that.
Oh, good Lord, no. Well, I not in the classic sense. So what's the thing of, I'm not a counselor, but I play one on TV. So or on podcast. No, so I am a coach. I wouldn't even necessarily say a life coach. What I help people with are particularly families with children with disabilities to identify resources that they may not be aware of. I had someone tell me once that where power comes from. Power does not come from having money and stuff like that. Power comes from having options. So we feel powerless when we don't think we have any options and we're stuck in our situation. A lot of times, if you can help people identify options that they didn't know they had, suddenly they feel better about themselves, even if they don't take advantage of them. Just knowing they're out there and they are choosing not to take advantage of them gives them power in their own lives. So I help families with disabilities identify resources. A lot of times it's changing perspectives. One of the underpinnings of the book is that, again, our happiness is a choice. And a lot of times just changing our perspective, that alone can relieve tons of stress, which then makes us better caregivers, makes us better people, and the benefits associated with that. I also give speeches to different groups on these same topics, on how attitude can drive so much of who we are and how we approach our lives. And regardless of the difficulty of the circumstances, there is a solution out there. So I work with parents one-on-one, sometimes in group efforts, but no, grief counseling would be probably not the right way to phrase it.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a copy of your book beside you? And for people who are watching the video, they can see it. I do see it behind your
See it
shoulder.
on other arm. There you go. Right, that one.
Right there.
So there's this.
I love that. I love the cover. It's just awesome. Okay, so I'm going to read it for the audience who is just listening to the audio and not seeing the video. It's a family odyssey through autism, death, and reinvention. God's plan, our circus.
That's it. And again, it's pretty heavy stuff. The autism is my children, the death is my late wife, and the reinvention is me.
I love the launching Clay 2.0. I might even use that as a title. I'm not really sure yet. We'll see.
Sounds great. That'd be wonderful.
Clay, it has been awesome having you on the show. Before we sign off, I would like for you to share a couple of the links where people can find you, how they can connect with you, links to your website. Of course, this is going to be in the show notes, but I really like to give my guests the opportunity to articulate how the audience can reach out to you.
Sure. Thank you. So I do have my website. It's clayboatright.com, ClayBoatright. There's no W. Clayboatright.com. You can find me on Facebook. I think Facebook, I'm Clayboatright 9. So I guess there's 8 others running around out there. And,
you know that it's a very common name. I was shocked when I looked you up. I tried to stalk you on LinkedIn, and so many profiles came up. It was like, whoa.
Yeah. I hope they're good guys, actually. So there's that, and then I'm also on LinkedIn as well, and I think I'm just Clay Boatright on LinkedIn. So I tell folks I'm the easiest guy to find. I'm not in hiding. So please reach out. And if people are having some unique challenges, certainly in the disability realm, or if they've lost a spouse or a loved one, I would consider it a personal blessing to me if they reached out and we can have a conversation.
I love the way you use that word again. Blessings.
They're a real deal. I've learned along a way to view things as blessings, but then also to truly show appreciation. And that's something that we tend to forget. We tend to focus more on our expectations of others. And I try to move away from that. I don't have expectations for others. Instead, I'm going to put that energy and show it into my appreciation of others and let them know how important they are. It makes me feel better, and I think it also brings an uptick into them as well.
Awesome. If more people had that same philosophy, I think the world would be a better place, and we sure could use a little bit of that right about now.
Exactly. Well, and to close it out, leveraging that on one of my many dating app profiles, horrible, isn't it? The question presented was a successful life is blank, and then you fill in the blank. So I put a successful life is making a woman smile every day. And it's not campy. It's legit, because I've seen it happen. That when you think about the impact that the FemiNinjas have, on society, from the immediate family to the friends to clients to people you encounter every day. So Cheryl, I'm going to use you as an example. So not just the impact you have on your family, but everybody you encounter, your podcast guests, your clients, everyone you touch. If someone, let's say your husband, is able to make you smile every day, the ripple of that is huge. It doesn't only just make you feel better, it benefits everybody who comes in your path. So I think that's not a bad objective to have.
Well, I think it's a wonderful objective.
Again, thank you so much for your time today. I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You are a fantastic guest, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. I love your positive energy, your outlook, and I love your sense of humor. Oh, and just in case any of the listeners are thinking, what apps is this guy on? Are you still looking for dates?
Oh, yes. Hey, there's 7 dinners in a week. You got to fill them up. But no, I'm sure the next one is the next. I'll say the next victim. That's not the right way to say. But no, I look forward. I enjoy meeting people, and hopefully the person that God has planned for me for the next 20 plus years, 30 plus years is out there. And so I'm the Facebook dating app and Hinge and a couple others. Man, I feel very, very cheap right now. I don't really know. I don't really know why, but keep that more in the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. So I'm not sure I'm not sure I'm geared up for long distance relationships. I have enough challenge, having a relationship with someone 2 miles away.
I can understand that. Well, Clay, thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. You're absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Cheryl. You're as well. I appreciate your time.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you as well. Please do share this episode with everyone you know. Give us a 5-star review on Apple. If you do that, I would love you forever. But let's face it, I'm going to love you forever anyway. Do check out Clay's website and do check out his book. It is really very, very, I'm very curious about it. I'm very intrigued, let's say. And, his sense of humor is absolutely just outstanding, and his outlook on life. And just remember that, if you can make one person smile every single day, just imagine how much better the world would be. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.